The great Abraham Lincoln once said, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." Look, seriously, it's right there. It must be true. I am actively feeding you this information, and I have zero reasons to lie to you. Isn't that the purpose of a presentation? I stand here in front of you all and present some idea or concept, whether it be novel or some cheesy Facebook meme you've all seen before. I have assumed the responsibility of not only creating a coherent pseudo-essay that presents the information I wish to present in a satisfying manner, but also, more importantly, I've assumed the responsibility of communicating what I actually wish to communicate to you. To demonstrate this communication, a brief history lesson. That quote actually stems from the fact that Abraham Lincoln is a time traveler who went back in time to teach Ulysses S. Grant proper internet etiquette. Or not. Who knows? I just read that on the internet. So, look, what matters to me is that each and every single one of you interpreted that in your own little ways. Ideally, some of you chuckled at my absolutely ridiculous story, whereas some of you find me terribly unfunny. And that's great. That's great. An entitlement to one's opinion is what makes the individual themselves. And so the fact that I can find polar opposite opinions in just one audience is absolutely wonderful. But before I delve into that, I would like to denotatively describe what a presentation is. So in searching for this, I enlisted the assistance of Merriam-Webster. This is what Merriam-Webster has as the definition of a presentation. I imagine if you're struggling with the word presentation, you are also struggling with the word presenting. So here is what Merriam-Webster has as the definition of the word presenting. Here's my proof. They're right there. But fortunately, there are other definitions provided, and knowing that a presentation is about bringing an idea to one's attention, I can now move forward and describe the building blocks of a presentation. The building blocks are as follows: the presenter and the presentees, of course. So a presentation isn't entirely built on who gives the presentation, the presenter. No. It's also built on those who view the presentation, you presentees, a mosaic of wildly varying personalities, tendencies, backgrounds, and so forth that then comprise the wildly varying perspectives that then comprise the audience, which in itself is a variable that the presenter has to take into account. To start, I would like to talk about the presenter. Their job is not only to do what I've established previously, but also to do it in their own unique way. As someone who sits through presentations by my peers in my everyday classes on a regular basis, I find myself critiquing one constant that seems to plague each and every presentation: uniformity. For the schooling system, at least, there seems to be a good enough cookie-cutter way to present that gets people the grades they strive to get. When one's motivation comes from the relatively lax incentive of an easily achieved grade, their work reflects that. And not only that, but they follow, as I said, some cookie-cutter, good enough structure. So to demonstrate this structure, a faux presentation on, say, Abraham Lincoln's history. So if I were to present like my peers might, I would turn around completely away from the audience, have all of my information on just one slide, and begin reading. In 2192, Abraham Lincoln was born. At the age of 6, Lincoln got into a horrible space elevator accident and had to replace half of his body with robotics, and so on and so forth, with, of course, proper citations. The issue with that example are highly apparent, I hope, and the fact that I see these presentations far too often becomes very troubling. Uninspired information blobs are put onto a screen whose only purpose is to be read off of. And so, following that, I implore everybody to take their own unique path when it comes to presenting. What I've found for optimal communication is that as novelty increases, interest generally increases, as represented by this highly scientific graph. As you can see, as novelty goes right, interest goes up, which of course is what you want. But to truly represent this graph, I'd like to bring in a very reliable source of information, an anecdote, that represents what this graph says in its entirety. So I'm here to provide an excerpt from a presentation I gave in my history class in September. It's a lot of ducks, right? So in that presentation, it was about the ungovernability of Latin American countries immediately following their independence. And the ducks represented caudillos, or warlords, in those countries. As you can see, it's hard to govern a country when there's a lot of ducks in them. So now that it's been about 2 months, I surveyed my fellow classmates and asked whether or not they remembered the presentations given on that day. And I've included those responses in this bar graph. As you can see, this proves precisely what I'm saying. Generally, the responses would go towards, I remember your presentation, I don't even remember my own. That's because most of the presentations given followed that format I structured with the Abraham Lincoln example. They were all boring and lacking creativity, whereas mine, which had abstraction and innovation, seemed to stick. I firmly believe that if with enough creativity and innovation, a person can extract a grand life lesson from this stock photo of cheese. I don't exactly have the creativity, but I firmly believe that it's possible. Right here is where the presentees slot in. Innovation and creativity can only take a presentation so far, as, like I said before, the audience is a variable that the presenter has to take into account. My ducks example worked in my class because I knew my audience. I knew 2 general things about them. 1, they really love animals. Kids my age really love animals. 2, they find really random things funny. They've all been exposed to the same absurd jokes that I have, and so I know their sense of humor. I'm able to approach them with those ducks, and that seemed to have stuck. So the point I'm trying to get at here is that innovation away from the cookie-cutter norm that one is intimate with is only possible if you relate to the audience itself. My ducks wouldn't exactly have gone over as well in a classroom full of final year history majors. Their interests are far too removed from mine. An abstraction like that wouldn't have worked. That's the power the audience has over a presentation. The presenter could be the wittiest human being on planet Earth, but if they swing and miss, the presentation will completely crash and burn. So presenting, I'm sorry to say, or the optimal way to present, rather, I'm sorry to say, is completely subjective. Unboxing that reality makes you realize that not everybody's willing to tell absolutely corny jokes. However, to the presenter that isn't willing to tell or take their own path needs to find a way to innovate uniquely to present effectively. Perhaps they're artsy and have a knack for creating an aesthetic presentation that wows their audience into remembering what they say. Or perhaps they're great with sounds, and they include little sound bites that correlate perfectly with the literary analysis that they put in their presentations. All in all, what is most important is that you stray away from the norm, like this wonderful sunflower. He's a little confused, but he's doing his best job. The sun's the other way, but he's definitely unique. If you take a look at the slides I've made for this presentation, you might find what people would call glaring structure issues. The slides contain hardly any information. The images are all, well, absurd and vaguely related. And the way I organize my individual slides is all out of whack. Here's a previous slide that you've seen. The image isn't centered. It makes no sense out of context. And the citation in the bottom right, which says, image by Joshua, the new Picasso Moore, is informal in every sense of the word. But perhaps you can call this unprofessionalism. But formality, I say, when left unchecked, breeds consistency. And consistency inhibits creativity and true human expression. It's like the great Abraham Lincoln once said, a true presentation is like cheese. This stock photo here is a completely unrealistic example because cheese never comes in triangles. Trust me. However, when people think cheese, they think this triangle, despite them having no good reason to do so. True cheese is subjective, based on taste, fit, American or Swiss, on a taco or in a sandwich. And I think if people want to truly communicate effectively, they need to take notes from true cheese. Thank you.